Hello everybody and welcome back to another Banking App Insight session. Legacy banks in the UK for June of 2022, and boy oh boy. As you'd expect with these sorts of banks, the vast majority of them duking it out at the top with fairly good customer experience and engaged customer scores, but there is one big elephant in the room, and that is HSBC. My God. We look at some of the other banks and some of the other segments, and you can see this sort of whack-a-mole approach of some gains, some going backwards, some gains again, and then going backwards as they're trying to fix problems. But Tony Sharp, HSBC, just continue the decline, underperformance. There is no real improvement on over a year. So this is a multi-billion-dollar problem with people threatening to leave, and you have to ask, are they committed to that customer experience, or are they just letting it ride? I'll pass it over to you and let's have a look.
Great, thanks Glenn. Yeah, so as you mentioned, there's a lot of good performers in the UK, but today we'll focus on HSBC, and this first chart will show you why. Now, we've seen, as you mentioned, there's some banks, they have a problem, they may take a few months to fix it. But if we look at, first of all, just look at the top. The top here, there's a few duking it out at the top here on this engaged customer score. Now, if you recall, the engaged customer score are those giving a comment and a score. And we find that's really the pointy end. If you're on top of this score, you can actually see things as they happen. Mm-hmm. And your scores are real movements in the quality of your app. So what we're seeing here is at the moment Lloyds is on top, but in the past we've got things like the likes of Barclays up there as well, and even likes of Nationwide. Although Nationwide have improved over the past 6 to 8 months, they're on a bit of a decline over the past 2 months. But again, that's sort of, it looks like nothing in comparison to what the story for HSBC. So this is in red at the bottom here. One of the things you can see is there was a decline happening at least a year ago. There was some problems going on. Looks like they attempted to fix a few things. They got better, but it looks like from December there was. I don't know what the story is inside HSBC, but there seems like they're sort of like, well, we've given up. We're not going to attempt to even try to fix these things. Let's let it drop away, and it seems to have dropped away from that December point. So it was sitting at around 2.5. The average score now is 1.5. And I've mentioned in other sessions here that the lowest possible score you can get is 1, and that's if everyone gives you a score of 1. But 1.5 is getting pretty much close to that. So, and again, like there seems to be some improvement in May and June, but that's not enough. And again, the speed of this, like from me, from a customer advocate, this is a whole year of inactivity from these customers, and obviously churn is part of that story. So let me just jump in and just show you the impact of what's going on inside here. Now, one of the familiar views you might have seen before is this SURF analysis, which is around the fundamentals you need to get right for your app to be just working at a base level, the foundations. So that's security and logging in, the usability, the reliability, and the functionality. And across the board here, you can clearly see what stands out here. So if you look at reliability on the left there, basically 1/2 of customers are talking about your app being unreliable. So this is actually all negative things. So being high is pretty bad. And 1/2 of customers saying it's unreliable. If we compare to some of the leaders like Lloyds at 6.7%, it's just a massive difference that you can't even compare. And it looks like HSBC are sort of working in a different world here. So one of the problems, of course, is this is across the board. I'm not going to solve their problems in this short conversation here, but what we can do is have a look at the impact of what's going on. So there's problems across the board everywhere, but let's have a look at one of the first pictures we can see here. In conversations that customers, the feedback they give, they will talk about leaving or moving in its various forms. And so what we can see here is the percentage of people talking about that. And if you recall that very first chart where we saw the HSBC score declining, this pretty much reflects that same movement, but in the opposite direction, of course. And so in June last year, we saw 1.5% of customers mention something about churning or leaving HSBC. And of course, even though these numbers, they reached a high point of 6 in April this year, they have dropped, but they're still sort of 4 at that level. And you might think, well, it's not that high, is it, at 4%? Well, we've got to consider that not everyone actually says that in their conversation. They're not actually all going to say, I'm going to leave, but in their head, they probably are thinking about leaving. Now, is that high? Is 6 or 4.5 high? Well, let's have a quick look. Let's have a quick look here across some other banks here. So, yeah, churn is mentioned by others, but if we compare it to, this is just in June, by the way, at 4.1% of customers talking about that, we see Lloyd's is at 0.3, so just about nothing. There's a handful of people talking about it, at 1.2 for nationwide. So again, HSBC is in a league of its own, and it's having actually a strong impact on customers. And if we look at the right here, though, at what's happening, and these are just the direct comments of people talking about threatening churn, we're getting, for example here, I moved bank because of the problems with the app after nearly 50 years with them. Frustrating enough to consider switching a bank with a functional app. It should be easier changing banks, and my advice is to switch banks immediately. Switch banks to a modern one so I can actually use my money. So these things are like, that's a massive problem. So anyone in here who wants to use the app as their main channel is having a major issue, and they're actually saying they're leaving. And I'd imagine in the numbers for HSBC, they're probably seeing similar things. So a massive problem for HSBC. They need to fix this. They need to go back to basics and get this right. So thank you, Glenn.
Yep, so HSBC, anyone there, if you're watching this, pull your socks up, my friends, and feel free to reach out and we can help you dig a little deeper in regards to what needs to be turned around. Thanks, folks. Feel free to share and reach out to us if you want to have a chat.